Well, hello everybody. Today we have a very special episode of Audience Cut. We are talking about the 2019 film by Mike Flanagan, Doctor Sleep. And as you can see, we're a little dressed up for the occasion. I'm the doctor, he's the sleep, and we have a lot to say. So we're gonna get started. Josh, it's really in the character. Josh, wake up, wake up.
Oh,
You all right?
yeah, hey, sorry, I was trying to rewatch Doctor Sleep before you came over. I guess in somewhere in that second hour I dozed off.
That's all right. So I noticed you were already set up in character and everything. So I set up the green screen, I set up the camera, and started recording.
This is recording?
Yeah. I thought you
You
were like ready to go.
so you just came to my house and just started recording while I was asleep. That makes sense.
Well, I, I mean, yeah, we come over at the same time. It's like you make me do weird stuff all the time too, you know. Well, in the day and age of sequels, reboots, um, it seems a very tired trope that I'm honestly sick of. But I think 2019 was that time before I really like, okay, I'm really done with this. And unfortunately, it bombed at the box office. I don't know why, because the marketing was all, this is The Shining, this is The Shining. But I think it's a great movie.
I don't know about magic. I always called it The Shining.
Yeah, when I watched it originally in theaters in 2019, I only saw it because I saw Mike Flanagan was directing it and Ewan McGregor was the star, and I was like, not super familiar with Flanagan, but I was like, oh, it's the guy who made Hill House. Like once I looked it up, so I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll check it out. So I had never actually watched The Shining before that, and so I watched it beforehand. Obviously, really liked it, and then went into Doctor Sleep with a pretty open mind and came away really loving it. Um, but that was not your initial impression.
No, it wasn't. Like, I don't know. I don't know if it was the marketing or what, or not being too familiar with the book, but I don't know what I was expecting. But it just wasn't what I expected at first. But I think once I let go of The Shining and just like this is its own thing, I liked it a lot more with every rewatch. In fact, even watching this, like the amount of times that they referenced back to the original film, I'm like, just to remind you what you're watching.
Yeah. Don't forget.
Like there was times where I'm like, oh, gotta remind the crowd here that this is The Shining, because I think even Flanagan knew like trail them along to keep them interested in this, because they might be going into the mindset that this is a direct Shining sequel, and it is, but it's also a sequel to the book or a book adaptation of Doctor Sleep. I just liked all the other stuff more this with every rewatch.
Yeah, I think that was probably the main reason we had such a different initial response is you were much more bought into The Shining than I was. I had just watched it one time and thought it was good and that's it. So I expected the Shining stuff to come in the movie because, as you said, the marketing was so heavy on it's a sequel to The Shining, it's a sequel to The Shining. And when there wasn't that much of it, and it was just kind of sprinkled throughout and then heavy in the third act, I was pleasantly surprised with the restraint. Now, knowing Mike Flanagan, I shouldn't have been surprised with the restraint, but I was. I was surprised at how focused it was just on being a character story, and also how different it was from The Shining, diving much more into the supernatural elements, dealing with kind of the same themes of alcoholism and stuff as The Shining, but going much further into it, and it really standing on its own as a movie. Obviously, because it was in theaters, I watched the theatrical edition. And watching it now for audience cut, we watched the director's cut of the film, which is a full 3 hours. And it was an exhausting watch.
Yeah, it was. Funny little behind the scenes, sometimes we paused to switch the batteries in the camera or use the bathroom. And every time we paused it, we're like, what do you think it says? And we think we're like an hour and a half in. It's like 40 minutes. We're like, ah.
Yeah, a lot of times I'll actually have like the full uncut reaction of the movie already edited and posted on Patreon by the time we're even recording this review because there's a little bit of time in between. I haven't even started editing the full cut reaction because I'm just not looking forward to. I think we had like 4 breaks we had to take during it, and every time there's a break, I have to, resync it back up and everything in the reaction. No one wants to hear me complain. But anyway,
But we will.
but my point is, even just the editing process, I know is going to be exhausting compared to a normal movie. With that being said, I still really, really like this movie. But this rewatch, after becoming so much more familiar with Mike Flanagan's stuff, I think just kind of showed me why Flanagan is such a master when it comes to miniseries. With films, we've talked about a lot of his films. This is actually his last one, his last movie he made so far. And I don't know, I'm kind of torn between like, this very well could be his best movie, but in the same way, just shows me why I think he's better at making TV.
Yeah, I think that's such an unfortunate thing. I mean, yeah, I do agree. I think he's better when he has this 6 or 8, hour-long movie per se. You can really flesh things out more. And even like I watched a little bit of the original cut, like the 2 hours and 30 minutes, and even watch it like a little bit before this, like you can tell like it's very like he had to cut like a lot. Some of the conversations feel like a YouTuber uh, video where they cut every bit of dead air. It was really weird. Like Carl Lumbly's speech as Dick Halloran, his first talk with Danny, like it felt very like quickened almost. It was weird,
Mm.
but yeah, it's unfortunate, because it didn't do that well at the box office, which means like okay, he'll probably just stick with like Netflix series because that's his bread and butter, and it's like probably not as expensive and it probably has a better turnout than the box office right now.
Well, and now he's signed his exclusive deal with, I get it mixed up every time, but it's either Amazon or Apple. I can't remember which
I
one.
think I think it was Amazon.
Amazon Prime, so he'll be making series for them. So he has that lane, that he's definitely have. Yeah, I don't know if he'll make more movies, and if he does, maybe he'll go back to just like the smaller horror stuff because when it comes to his films, I feel like I don't know. I feel like Doctor Sleep is like his best made film because he clearly has the most money and everything and experience. But like I like some of his just like smaller, quick paced horror stuff
Oh
like
yeah,
Absentia or Oculus. Even though I had problems with his other movies that we talked about, Gerald's Game. I like all of them. So yeah, it's tough.
like is Mike gonna do anything that like he wants to do now, or is it all gonna be like what he thinks is gonna push? But I think with the Amazon series, I think he's gonna do what he wants to do. I hope so.
Yeah, well, and I actually, in my research, looking into the behind the scenes of this movie, I think that he really is a really big Stephen King fan.
Beat up paperback from the library when I was in 5th grade. I was way too young to read it, I think. But boy, did I read it. And it completely changed the way I looked at the world. It terrified me in a way that I, in 5th grade, had never been scared. And now I'm sitting here next to you, which is also completely surreal.
So he's a big fan, and I think it shows through in this movie, both with the tone of Stephen King stuff, but also with callbacks and everything to The Shining. But I saw in interviews that he said he really wanted to have his own style and not lean too much on Kubrick's work.
I very intentionally did not want to live in Kubrick's angles. And I was trying very hard not to homage Kubrick's coverage.
He wanted to stand on its own, and I think that's a success, but it's also a detriment to the film because as someone who went in loving The Shining, you didn't love it that first time because you were expecting a tribute to The Shining.
Yeah, that sort's tough, but just like I think this film and others, the cult classic didn't do well at the box office, but will be loved years beyond the billion-dollar movies today. Like this is one that people are going to go back and always think fond of.
One thing I really liked about the movie is the decision to recast all of the Shining performances. And he said that he decided not to go the digital route because he feels like whenever he watches a movie that has that technology, even though it's getting better and better, he's always instantly pulled out of the film because now he's judging how good is the technology? Am I convinced? Even if it's really good, it's still like, oh wow, this is so crazy how good that looks. You're not immersed anymore. And he really didn't want that to happen in this movie, which makes sense because it's such a deep character story. You don't want that distraction.
Yeah, I agree with that, but also with it's the same on the other end where it's like, oh, they cast someone else. You're thinking
Sure.
that as well. But also, I've heard that there's something in our brains that can recognize when something isn't a natural face.
Uncanny Valley.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, where it's like something's not right here. Where it's like, and plus us knowing, like if they did de-age Jack Nicholson, we'd be able to, like, okay, like, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And I love all the recasting. I think
Alex Esso
as
as Shelley Duvall.
Shelley Duvall is probably the best, like, casting, like, being herself, but also emulating Shelley Duvall to not an annoying degree was, I mean, that must have been tough as an actor, to act as, that version, and but also be very compassionate, human, empathetic. Carl Lumbly also as Dick Halloran, perfect. Just like, I don't know, like, where Carl Lumbly's been, but I've only seen him as like a 60-year-old man. But he's fantastic. As much as I love Henry Thomas, it's like I think he did well, but it's like, oh, I just really want a scene with Ian McGregor and Jack Nicholson. Like, to me, that would have been amazing.
Just literally bringing back Jack Nicholson to
Yeah,
redo it.
yeah.
If do you
Like, I
think he
want to see
would,
just these, like, two, like, amazing actors just having that scene together.
and then de-age him or just leave him as is.
You probably have to de-age him a little bit, but
Yeah,
like, I just
that would be wild.
it would be, yeah.
Especially the studio, obviously, if you look at the marketing, didn't want to hide anything. But if they were able to hide that, no one knew he was in it, and then he showed up there.
Well, I don't think they ever showed Jack Nicholson in the trailers for
True.
I mean Jack Torrance.
Yeah,
in any of the
but I mean, if they had cast Jack Nicholson, though, I feel like they would have been. It would have been Harrison Ford in Blade Runner. Like they would have put him in all the marketing.
Yeah.
I really love, Ewan McGregor's performance as Danny Torrance grown up. I didn't see any parallels until you brought them up between like how you're like actually him looking like he would be Jack Torrance's son. With the facial expressions he makes.
And this right here is like, this is Jack Torrance's kid. Look at his face.
Yeah, that's good.
Isn't that fucking scary? Like, that gives me chills. He looks terrifying. At first, I'm like, really? Ian McGregor? It's like, I never would have thought of him as, Jack's kid, but then, like, sometimes when they shoot him, it's like, oh my God, picture perfect casting.
Yeah, and then I also think that Rebecca Ferguson as Rose the Hat, who isn't based on a character from the movie The Shining, one of the few original characters in this, obviously she's adapted from the book.
Mm-hmm.
Again, really love when the villain doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm going to take over the world or I'm, going to do this. Like, the villains in this movie just like exist as like these weird roadies who are just like in the forest. They do obviously maliciously kill people, but it's for their survival. They don't have any like bigger ridiculous plans to do anything that, Danny Torrance has to go stop to save the world. Like, it's a very personal story even for the villains.
Yeah, just go, and it makes me not want to live forever because I don't know, you're just traveling in these like campers, just always trying to find food. You're just cooler vampires, I guess. But yeah, I was my first watch. I did not care or like Rose the Hat at all. I don't know if it was her just trying to shove her catchphrase in every scene.
Well, hi there. Well, hi there. Well, hi there. Well, well, well. Hi there.
I was bought in from that opening scene, where they eat the first child, basically. They really set her up well, I think, in that scene of like, you got to take this group of people, especially Rose the Hat, seriously. Like, they're vicious. They will kill an innocent child. Like, that is the opening, of the movie.
You are a special little thing, aren't you?
I don't sympathize with her in a way of like, understand or agree with her goals, because obviously she is evil. Like, she's killing innocent people, especially children. So not in that way, but in the sense of like, even though they're not human, it like humanizes them very well. And not just her either.
Like the other ones, what do they do? Like, what do they bring to the table? I wish we had more scenes where it's like almost like humanizes them some more because they're always just sitting around.
Yeah, they really don't dive into all of them. It seems like a lot of them are there for one scene, which we'll get to that scene.
I got to give credit to, I don't know if it's Ewan's performance, the writing, direction, but like Danny Torrance in this movie starts off as the most despicable, character, like leaving this woman and her kid for dead, and then like by the end, you're like 100% with them. That's pretty good.
So the film starts off after the Rose the Hat scene that we already talked about, getting what we didn't get in The Shining, and what you kind of praised for not getting in The Shining, was the aftermath of the Overlook Hotel, where Danny is in the apartment with his mom, and they are just kind of like watching TV, and like we get some scenes of them together in the aftermath, and probably like, what do you think, like maybe 10, 15 minutes of that, and then it jumps into him as an adult. I like getting that at the beginning with child Danny. It could have very easily just thrown us right into adult Danny, and then it's like, you've seen The Shining, you fill in the gaps, you know, but it doesn't do that all the way. It gives us this little piece of it. What'd you think of it though?
I like the continuance like of the trauma. Like it doesn't just leave once they go to the hotel and everything's fine. Like most things, things haunt you, like traumatic experiences, and one of them being in literal form is this old woman won't let him, go to the bathroom per se, or he's afraid to go in there, so he wets himself. I'm glad it's in this movie and not The Shining. Like the aftermath, like separate movie sequel, that's fine. And I like the jumping back and forth to how Danny learned to deal with it. I guess I thought it was weird that they followed him. I guess so. I don't know. What do you think about it?
I don't think it makes much sense
Yeah.
because that's like a pretty conflicting thing with The Shining, the movie The Shining, I mean.
Hmm.
And again, as someone who hasn't read either book, I can't speak to it how it's fully explained, but I agree with you. I think it makes much more sense for everything to be in this building, the Overlook Hotel. But then the way that this movie describes it is that all those ghosts are just part of The Shining. And the Overlook Hotel is a place that just makes The Shining like, it's like an amplifier for The
Hmm.
Shining, but The Shining can be anywhere. And the people who have The Shining, it's like this Wi-Fi network, basically.
Yeah.
So you in that damn hotel, you was like a 1,000,000-watt battery all plugged in, and it ate it up.
It's like the one thing I love about The Shining is how like nothing's explained why it's happening, and this movie like tries to do that and goes into supernatural and gives like all these details. So I'm like, am I led to believe that what the old woman tried to do with Danny off screen in The Shining was, get that steam out of him? Because
Yeah, because that's what ends up happening. Yeah, I
yeah,
guess so. But then
yeah,
she didn't do that to. Yeah, it just doesn't make sense when trying to compare it to The Shining, the movie, because it's like, obviously it never happens in that
yeah.
movie.
I mean, Jack doesn't shine per se. Maybe it wasn't as unique.
Carl Lumbly's monologue is, I think, the first of the movie, and at least in the director's cut, it goes on for a while, and it's really great.
My grandma taught me, and I taught you. Someday, Danny Torrance, you'll teach someone else.
But as with watching all this Flanagan stuff, it's like on first watch with all of these, I didn't really realize how many monologues are and everything. And so when this first one hit, I'm like, oh shit, there's gonna be a lot of monologues in this too. But they're all good, And this one was a really strong one to start. And I listened to Mike Flanagan talk about when directing the actors who are playing these recasted characters, that he did not want any of the direction of the acting or for the actors to try to mimic the performances of the actors.
Was to try to find actors who would remind me a little of those iconic characters, just enough to kind of point my memory in that direction, but then beyond that, who would not be doing an impression or a parody of those performances, who would then hopefully be able to just inhabit the character. So it became about Dick Halloran and not Scatman Carruthers, but with just enough notes to kind of tilt my brain that way.
And by being Dick Halloran, you're going to have little notes of Scatman Crothers in there, but your focus isn't to be that performance, be the character. And I think Carl Lumbly is the best example of that, probably. Like, I believe he's Dick Halloran while still respecting it as its own performance.
Yeah, like obviously he wasn't, doing like an impression. Like I've seen Carl Lumbly in other things. That's how he talks. That's how he is. But like he's able to emulate that character while being himself, which is probably like the best of acting that you can do.
Yeah.
Is like in my acting class is like, oh, you got to be yourself, but like be true to this character. And I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
It's like I'm supposed to play something else, but be myself. It's like, and then seeing that performance, I'm like, oh.
And even a lot of famous A-list actors can't do that. Like a lot of really famous actors, their biggest thing is, they're just themselves in every movie. So it's like, that is insanely difficult. I think there's also advantages to just being yourself in every movie from a brand and celebrity perspective.
Yeah, or on the other side, they just go way off in their character actors, where it's like, I mean, nothing wrong with that, but it's like you can find that balance where it's like, you're a star.
Yeah, so that was really great. And then as we get to adult Danny, and he's kind of at the lowest point of his life, he doesn't use the Shining anymore because he doesn't want it to come with all the consequences of it, deep into his alcoholism. Uh, what did you think of all that, that first representation? You already talked about the first scene of leaving the mother and child, but
Yeah, I thought like, whoa, this is a lot, but I'm like, okay, lost his mom at a young age, had the most traumatic experience ever at 5 years old. Uh, Not really the best, groundwork for a great future, I guess. Uh, I think it was so extreme, just to show like a great contrast to who he becomes, and like no matter how deep in something you are, there's hope you can get out of it.
yeah, absolutely. And then, he eventually gets on his feet a little bit, getting to that attic space. And then eventually just jumps 8 years. But before we get to that, we get the introduction of Abra and her parents and her life, first as a small child.
A little more.
No more, sweetie. Big day tomorrow.
Birthday party.
Yeah.
So just to talk about Abra a little bit, I'm sure she's in the book, so I'm sure it's not something they could have avoided. I don't hate her character, but I really wish that the movie was more of a Danny Torrance movie, and it's really not. And I think like one of the big reasons it's not is because like of the focus on Abra. There's like this weird kind of split in the movie's narrative, and unfortunately, I don't care that much about Abra. So the movie really slows down. I just don't have the attachment to the character, and the movie doesn't do a great job getting me attached to the character.
Yeah, I mean, they don't really flesh her out that much. It's like we don't see like anything about her life at all. Like it just feels like she's like the middle connector because she's the one who senses the baseball kid being killed and then tells Danny about it.
Rose of the Hat and that crew, they don't even know about Danny Torrance, and like they don't really care.
You should be afraid, because you don't know where you're standing.
I'm sorry, who are you, handsome?
Yeah, she doesn't even care. It's like it makes him like not that big of a deal like to the story from a narrative perspective, even though like he obviously is needed for what plays out. But like from a narrative perspective, it just really kind of made him seem like a side note when I felt like he should have been the movie.
Yeah, but like she says like, "How did we miss you?" And it's like, "Oh my God, you have all this ability as like a full-grown man." It's like if like Danny Torrance never went to the hotel, he probably would have been killed by him.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just found that probably my biggest gripe with the movie, and unfortunately, I hate when my criticisms come down to personal preference. But I'm trying to state it in a way that it's not just a personal preference. If the movie had gotten me attached to Abra and to care about Abra, I would feel differently. But I just don't. And the only protagonist character I care about is Danny, who has growth and has a good story and has great scenes. But I'm just left feeling like I just wanted more of that. In a 3-hour movie, I wanted more of something.
Yeah. And also we get into so much about Danny's character and his trauma and what he's done. And with Abra, it's just, oh yeah, I can do whatever.
Yeah, and it's not that I don't want Abra in the movie because I think Abra is very important to Danny's character arc. Just like how Dick Halloran explains to him in his monologue of passing it on. So that's a needed character. I just wish it wasn't like such a main focus without making her the protagonist. Like if the movie had completely shifted and we're seeing everything from the point of view of Abra, and then Ewan McGregor is the Harrison Ford in Blade Runner coming in halfway through, then we're talking about a different movie. But that's not what it was, so it just felt a little bit messy in that regard.
Should have cast Ryan Gosling as Abra.
So then we get the introduction to Abra, and then we do the 8-year time jump, and we come back from the 8-year time jump, I believe, with Danny Torrance giving his 8-year speech at AA.
Yes, and before that he's like, "Oh, I'm not one for speeches," and just gives a great speech, of course, because it's a Mike Flanagan monologue.
And he held a chip in his hand, and that chip said 5 months. Well, on that day, all he wanted in the world was to stand where I'm standing now.
In the middle of that, like Abra finds him somehow and opens up contact. So they've been like little pen pals and stuff.
Through his wall.
The
blackboard wall.
The blackboard wall.
And then they eventually, she goes to him to like meet him because
the baseball kid gets killed.
Jacob Tremblay. I think that's the toughest scene of the whole movie. We already know what they do to kids, but we didn't see it graphically like they do with Jacob Tremblay. And Jacob Tremblay, like we made fun of him a little bit in our reaction, but he's such a great actor.
He acted his heart out in that scene.
Even a scene of just being brutally murdered, it's so well done that it truly made me uncomfortable. Like I didn't want to be watching it.
Are you gonna hurt me?
Yeah.
Yeah, that scene is one of the most uncomfortable things I've ever watched. It's like, and what's up with Flanagan and killing kids, man? 3 of them die in this film. I respect it.
Yeah, but I don't think it's like distasteful or like unnecessary, like for the sake of being dark. Like, it does make you again buy into the seriousness of the True Knot, even though it's a lame name for their group. It makes you buy in, like, oh wow, these guys are serious.
But really quick cameo by the real Danny Torrance. Oh, and that's actual Danny Torrance right there from the first movie.
Oh,
Yeah, like
nice. They gave him a little
yeah,
cameo.
I love that. It's so great.
After Abra meets Danny, we also get the introduction of Abra to Rose the Hat, where she senses her in the grocery store. And when I saw this movie in the theater, this is the scene that really took it to the next level for me. The whole sequence of Rose the Hat in the grocery store, just kind of like sensing Abra around, and then the moment with the glass door. Shattering and her just being blown back, because I loved how up to this point Rose the Hat has been built as this like extremely strong character who has like the strongest grip on the Shining that we've seen, because obviously Danny doesn't use it anymore. So for her to then just be completely blown away by Abra was, I thought, a great setup for Abra, which unfortunately doesn't lead to much. But it was a great setup of like, oh, you think Rose the Hat's been powerful this whole time? Look at this.
Just funny, these like eternal beings pretty much just going grocery shopping.
Yeah, it's funny to see that.
It's
Yeah.
like they're just stuck doing these regular things. It's like that's what you get when you live forever. You still have to do all this regular stuff. You know what I mean?
And also funny thinking about who knows how long Rose the Hat has been alive, but it's like, grocery stores have only been a thing, like, obviously in the past couple centuries. It's like years ago, she had to gather food out in the wilderness. And
Yeah, she's probably like, oh, this is great.
yeah, she's come all the way to being a grocery store shopper.
Oh yeah, we take it for granted. Yeah, her and like probably a couple of the others probably really like it. Yeah.
And I thought about that because we talked about it in the reaction. We're like, well, you live forever and you decide to just live out in the woods, like with no money or whatever, or they seemingly have a lot of money and power, but it's not on display. But maybe it's because that's what they're used to. If they've all been alive for that long, maybe they aren't used to modern civilization. So as it comes around, they're not just going to immediately adapt and be the same as regular people.
Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe you got to think with their situation. Like, I don't think they can have their names, any titles or property, because after a while, it's like, oh, you've been around for quite a while, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's the Cullens from Twilight. Yeah.
Yeah.
We actually get the introduction to Danny Torrance becoming Dr. Sleep in the hospital.
My favorite stuff in the movie, probably.
Maybe it's just like you say, just going to sleep.
Start to sleep.
One of my favorite ones is when he sings Frank Sinatra with the one guy. And like, oh, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it.
If you can use some exotic booze, there's a bar in far Bombay.
It's amazing how that scene can happen and just make me forgive where he was in the beginning of this film. It's like, stuff makes me feel so good.
Yeah, and I think it just also goes to show that, people, it's tough for people to change, and a lot of times people don't change, but at the same time, like for that character to be that low, that's such a low point in his life, and now 8 years later to be in this spot, being such a help to these people, I just think it's one of those themes of, it's never too late, and regardless of your past, it's never too late to make a change with your life. And I think it's a very uplifting message in a kind of sad, depressing movie, like with really deep themes. I mean, if that doesn't describe Mike Flanagan's work right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this movie is at its best when it's focusing on the character of Danny Torrance and his character growth, and that's why those scenes are some of the best in the movie, even though it doesn't deal with any of the, cool, bigger supernatural stuff. We get to the scene that you have made fun of, the flying scene, but where Rose attempts to find Abra, but is actually tricked by her and then has to, go through her traps.
Things I love about The Shining is like the not explained, the not on camera, the implied, it's like when that slow walk with young Danny Torrance after the Green Woman, you think, grabbed him or choked him or whatever, but we don't see that. We just see that slow scene of Danny walking, and it's like nothing fantastical was ever shown on screen, really. Nothing someone flying over oh, this is Sidebar, you know the famous opening shot of The Shining,
Mm-hmm.
the helicopter. What if that was Rose? But no, I mean, just watching that scene for the first time, I'm like, what is this?
I'm guessing it's in the book. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like anytime something like that happens, I'm like, it's probably in the book.
We're not talking about the book.
And the visual effects look good. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
weird. It's just a weird thing to show, but the effects look good. I do like, though, the visual portrayal of Abra's trick that she has set up for her, where Rose the Hat goes into her room and then there's the spotlight on her and then there's all the different filing cabinets. Not as big a fan of the hand mutilation.
God, also, Mike and his goddamn hand mutilation. I think it was Hush,
Hmm.
where it's like she goes to like shut the door, but the guy shuts it, and
Yep.
it's like,
And then Gerald's game with the handcuff.
oh God,
is
yeah.
even worse. Yeah.
I forgot about that, Josh. Thanks. Now, now it's in my brain.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And this one's, it's like it's getting gradually worse with how gruesome it is.
The more money he gets, the more he wants to.
Show the hand mutilation. After she tells Danny that, this happened, and Danny realizes he has to go with her, and he admits everything to the guy that found him and gave him the job, and he's like, you gotta believe me. And then they go to meet her, and this is one of my favorite scenes in the movie where he pulls in and then the dad comes out.
What are you doing?
He's like, you know how old she is?
Your Uncle Dan? The fuck you think you are?
Sir.
He immediately assumes it's some like creepy, it's
Yeah.
like,
Because what else would you think it is?
yeah. I mean, the dad has a slight idea that his daughter's special, but like two full-grown men just pulling up, like, oh hey,
Yeah.
we're here.
Just like, yeah, just Danny Torrance with the beard and everything, just like, oh, hey. And he does bring it up to him, like, oh, you know that she's special. He does bring that up, and eventually the daughter shows him, so he really has no choice but to believe her.
Yeah, it does the mind thing, and like I like that because it's very similar to the scene in the original where Dick Halloran's laying on the bed and he starts, going like this. And we didn't mention, but there's another scene where Abra first sees Rose the Hat when they're killing the baseball kid. She does that as well. She's like, similar thing. So, like little things like that where it's a little consistent. And then after Abra shows the dad, everything, immediately cuts to him pouring himself a drink.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you want one? And you're like,
From this point forward, I don't think that the movie's bad or anything, but I think this third act is like substantially weaker than acts 1 and 2, like the rest of the movie, because I feel like at this point Danny Torrance's character growth is like almost done, and the rest of this movie is just plot and shining stuff. There's great scenes still that we'll talk about, but in terms of like the strength of Dr. Sleep, the movie, I really like, I think, these first 2 hours more.
yeah, I love the peak of Danny letting people, guiding people to rest and his goodbye with Dick.
It seems to me you grew up fine, son. But you still owe a debt. Pay it.
Like that, I wish that's where his story ended.
This is what I think is the worst scene of the movie, where they pull the elaborate trick on the True Knot and get them, they think they're coming for Abra, it's just a teddy bear or something, like it's just a doll, and then Ewan McGregor and the other guy are just shooting them with like hunting rifles or something.
Yeah, it's like, what is this? It's like, yeah, when it turned into a shootout, I'm like, okay, this is where they're really divulging from The Shining, because they established like the guy used to hunt or whatever, so like, okay, his hunting rifles, and they just like these beings that have been around for decades, centuries, just bam, bam, bam. It's like,
yeah, it weakens all those characters, because it's like, yeah, I thought they were supposed to be like the only way they would die, is if they run out of steam. Like, no, you can just kill them in any normal way. Like, not even a weakness like a vampire. Like, no, just literally any normal death, they'll die. And then on top of that, it also made me feel like, oh, all of these other characters are only here for this one scene to have bodies.
they have bodies.
To kill, and it's like that makes it feel weaker.
Because it seems like the only thing they do is sit around and look for people to kill. But if there was some interpersonal details, conflicts with all of them, where it's not just, yeah, they're dying, it's more of like, oh God, like if we learn more about them, once again, something that would do really well on a TV show.
TV show, yeah.
With more time.
Yeah.
But also, I brought up earlier that, I forget his name, but Danny's friend who like got him the apartment and everything, went on this super long trip to dig up Baseball Boy, found him, has this nice little, you know, acting real monologue that Flanagan gave him about hunting.
Found that buck huddled up to a hollow trunk, dead for days. This is the same smell.
It's a great monologue.
Great
too.
monologue, yeah. Which is like, oh yeah, I used to hunt. It smells like this. That's the short version. But
Yeah.
like Mike Flanagan's like, buddy, you're getting a monologue for your acting real. I like you. And similar to what Dick Halloran did for Danny, going all this way and dying, same thing for this guy.
Yeah, Danny has that effect on people.
Danny has that effect on people.
Kill yourself.
No! Billy! You just want to die for him.
And
Or you will die for him.
while I think it is a creative and well done death with what's her name, the snake, I think they call her, with the snake telling him to kill himself, it pays off her character because that's been her whole character the whole time. Right before she dies, she gets, you know, someone to kill themselves. And
You notice we didn't talk about her scene because I don't care about it.
yeah, me either. But I also didn't buy into the fact of while she's dying, she tells him to kill himself, and he does. But then she's like laughing right before she dies. And I'm just like, the little that we got of her character, I don't buy it. Like, she's only been with this group for 8 years. She was 15, so she would have been in her early 20s, even without all of this stuff. And she's just laughing, accepting her death because she got one guy to kill himself. Like, you haven't earned that level of sinister. Like, when a really sinister character laughs while they're dying, like, you can believe it, and it's effective. But with her, I just didn't buy it.
Yeah, like she was malicious, but because she would go online and try to like catch pedophiles.
Yeah.
Like hunt like married men trying to find 15-year-old girls. That makes sense. Not this guy.
Yeah.
You know, don't laugh at this guy dying. That I hated her character.
And I wish there had been more terror of her, like, I'm gonna fucking die. Like,
I was promised to live forever.
because some of those characters, the old man's death scene, which we'll talk about, I think we skipped, but we'll talk about it. But his death scene and then all these other small characters are all like, holy shit, I'm fucking dying. And then she's just laughing and accepting it.
Yeah, like this guy's been around for years. If anyone should be sick of life, it's him. But no, at the end, you know, he's like, I'm scared. It's like that. You know how powerful that is? And like Rose the Hat's like, you have, you know, watched kings, emperors, and all this, and you've made it through. And she's there with him, but as soon as he dies,
It's like an instinct, yeah. Like
Yeah.
animals, yeah.
yeah, I think that was probably the only and favorite characterization of that group. Like that was their main guy, probably the one who like started it all, maybe, and like transferred Rose the Hat, the Crow, and like probably in his older age, like took a back seat, but he might have been like the first one, and just for that to happen to him, he was great.
Oh yeah, it was. So yeah, that whole shooting scene is like look, man, we've done, you know, close to what, 10 of these videos on Mike Flanagan at this point. He's impressive, so much stuff that he does. I think action might be the one thing he needs to work on. If he ever gets another chance, maybe do action a little bit better, because it did not play well, I think, in this scene.
Yeah, we know what his strong points are. That almost feels like studio, like we need something. We need a shootout. And Mike's like, what? We need a shootout. You know what I'm making?
Yeah, I feel like you could have just saved all of them. They all go to the Overlook and make it a huge fucking, you know, Danny Torrance, Abra, and the ghosts of the Overlook against the True Knot, you know? It's like, could have been so...
And Endgame. Dun, 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 dun,
Then, yeah, Rose Hat with all the True Knot behind her, and then...
Just Danny walking by himself.
Yeah.
And then like on your left, and then just like the butler walks on.
On your left.
And
So, but first it would have to be Dick Halloran as the Black Panther, the first one out of the portal.
Yeah. But he's in the Black Panther costume.
And then we get to the big final act at the Overlook Hotel and all the shining stuff at the Overlook Hotel. And I think that we obviously namely have to talk about the bar scene. I mean, I think you said the bar scene is your favorite scene in The Shining, right?
Yeah.
So was this bar scene your favorite scene in Doctor Sleep?
Yes. I think it was like the same framing, same shot of him walking down that hallway, turning left, walking to the bar, and there's just that glass sitting there. That same glass that Jack probably drank from in the first movie. And like, just like the tension, and like when he starts talking, and like on a first watch, you're like, wait, he's talking to him? He's talking to him? Because it's been a while since we touched any of the original Shining stuff. Like we got all the scenes like with the mom out of the way. Dick's been gone for a bit, so you almost forget about it because it's all just Doctor Sleep stuff. And then, yeah, probably my favorite scene.
Yeah, I watched an interview with Ewan McGregor talking about that scene, and
I didn't anticipate feeling so emotional playing that scene because I read it much more angrily. It surprised me how upsetting it was to play, funnily enough.
And like he finally gets to slip through and talk to his son, and all he does is complain.
A man tries. He provides. But he's surrounded by mouths.
Mouths eat and nag and scream and cry. It's like you haven't seen your kid in how many years? Maybe times different at the hotel in the afterlife, but all he does is like complain.
It's enough to make a man sick. And this is the medicine.
Unredeemable.
yeah. I mean, yeah, that's rough.
And also, even in that performance, like he's pouring the drink, and like you can see him like he's about to cry. He's like, "Oh, Dad, this drink will cost me an awful lot. 8 years behind me, I don't know how many in front." Oh, that's so great.
Rose the Hat arrives at the Overlook Hotel. Danny and Abra are waiting for her on the stairs, legendary stairs, and we get kind of a recreation of that scene from The Shining a little bit. I liked this scene. What did you think about just how the scene plays out in terms of kind of the recreation of walking up the stairs and everything, and then all the ghosts being unleashed by Danny? I mean, it's kind of like almost like a superhero move. Like, look at this.
Yeah. Well, first I do like the fake maze scene where like they think they're in Abra's mind, and it's like, oh wait, no, you're not in Abra's mind. Whose mind is this? And it's Danny's mind, like with all the boxes.
Oh yeah.
Sure. And like the effects where it's like as soon as like Rose realizes it's like not Abra's mind, it's Danny's mind, she goes no, and then like there's like a you know what I mean? Like
It's like, okay. So this is one of my big complaints. Abra just runs away.
Really?
Yeah. Danny has his only interaction with Rose the Hat in the film. And, you know, Rose the Hat's about to kill him. She's twisting his knee, taking his steam. And then that's when he releases all the ghosts and they all attack Rose the Hat. And they just kill her. And that's it. And to me, it was kind of underwhelming. But wait, the movie still has like 20 minutes and our main villain is now dead. So let's possess Danny, you know, and it's just like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Rose doesn't even get like the final interaction with Abra. You know, Rose doesn't kill Abra's dad directly, but like Crow does. So like, you know, it's basically Rose doing it. And, you know, Abra doesn't get any type of like comeuppance or, you know, final say. Like Abra just runs away and then Rose is dead and then she just sees Danny possessed. It was just very anticlimactic to me. As much as I love the recreation of the stairs scene, and
they also do recreate it with Henry Thomas and the actress playing.
Oh, Alex Esso?
Yeah, they do recreate that. They also recreate the, you know, Henry Thomas, Danny boy.
Yeah.
But earlier on with the scene with Jack, like just out of nowhere, he brings up like, you know, I changed my eyes for so because she would look at me and turn away, and like we didn't really get to see much of that like relationship fall apart. So he just talks about it in this last act, where it's like she wouldn't even be able to look at me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know it, but I finally realized it's because she saw me and you. And then he also brings up like the, you know, the death flies thing, so I couldn't look at her in her like all that felt like almost like tacked on at the end, just to have a nice resolution. It was a great resolution. I love the scene, but just to have a nice resolution of Wendy and Danny looking at each other at the end. That's my only gripe. It was nice, but it's like Danny just brought it up like last second almost with this talk with Jack, just so that scene makes more sense.
I think the actual ending of the movie I do like. I like Danny sacrificing himself, essentially burning down the hotel, and what happens to all those spirits. I mean, I guess they just live in the ether. Like, if they're not trapped in the hotel, then I guess it doesn't matter that it burned down. I don't know. But I do like that ending, and it got me on my first watch, the scene where Abra's talking to him in her room. Like, I didn't know he was dead at first.
Shine on, Aberstone.
Who are you talking to?
No one.
And then that's when it clicked. I'm like, oh shit, you know, I'm like, that was good. I liked that.
And it goes full circle with Dick. You know, now he's that role.
I think it seems like we've been more negative on this film than we have on a lot of Mike's other stuff. And I just want to be clear, like, I really still do like this movie. I mean, when I saw it in theaters, it was like my favorite movie of the year. I don't quite know if it still holds up to like that high of praise from me. I think there's a reason I didn't rewatch it for 4 years, and when I went back to it, I didn't like it as much. But I still really like this movie, and I'll also echo, what I said in some of our previous Mike Flanagan videos, where Mike Flanagan, unfortunately, because he's so talented, gets graded on a very high curve, right? Like, we're expecting masterpieces, and the perspective of watching not only The Shining recently, but then watching Haunting of Hill House, which might be Mike Flanagan's best thing ever, to this, there is a small drop off you feel, because it does a great job, I think, like tributing The Shining and paying respect, but outside of Alex Esso's performance versus Shelley Duvall, I don't think it does anything better than The Shining.
You just had to throw that in.
I had to get that in there. And did you notice how she was like, like breathing heavy and yelled a little bit, but she just wasn't like screaming like, oh, okay, all right, I'll stop.
I know how you feel about shit. To me, like at first, it seems like he almost like was like a hired hand, but no. After you telling me that, like, oh no, he read Stephen King like as a kid, 5th grade, I'm like, okay, that's cool, because I can see someone like watching Hill House. I'm like, because that's very similar story with like the haunted building. Yeah, like is this his best thing ever? No, but also you thought like we're grading it or critiquing it, but it's like I'm thinking of his other stuff, like I don't know, Before I Wake, where it's like conversation's not gonna be that long.
Yeah,
About
10-minute video, yeah.
Yeah, about Before I Wake, but this one it's like good stuff sparks conversation and debate. It's like this. If this was anything else or made by someone else, it could have been like a 10-minute video or not even.
Yeah, not even worth talking about.
Not even worth talking about. Like there's a lot of good stuff to go back and forth on in this. I mean, it was 3 hours. I would hope so.
Yeah, and like I said earlier in the video, like it may very well be his best made film, even though I have issues with it, and I like his other films. I just think from what we've seen of him and what we're going to talk about next as well, I think he might just be better at TV and more long form story, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. This isn't, the 80s or the 70s, like TV is on a lesser level than movies, you know what I mean? Like long form can be just as good, if not better.
They're not really TV shows. They're extended movies.
Yeah.
You're like, TV is what we're watching now with Star Trek. Like that's a TV show. Like that's like episodic, like TV shows today are just extended movies for the most part.
Especially after a 1-season miniseries.
Oh yeah.
For sure. So
exactly.
So but yeah, so just to be clear, I really like the movie.
They just thought, I really like the movie. Sorry. They just thought that maybe this would do well at the box office because it's The Shining. That's my guess as why it was a movie and not a series, because they thought maybe they could make some more money with theaters.
Yeah, and
but it didn't work.
They're like, The Shining's not a TV IP, it's a movie IP. Make a movie. And Warner Brothers is like, gotta make this movie. But I mean, yeah, it's much better than a lot of the outcomes could have been if they had given it to a number of other people. It could have been terrible, and it wasn't. I mean, so many sequels or reboots or remakes or anything of classics are so bad that to get one that's just so like wildly stands on its own and is different, even if it doesn't, surpass The Shining in quality. Like, what movie could have done that? It would have been near impossible, right? So, yeah.
That's why I'm glad it wasn't a remake boot of The Shining. Like, it tried to do its own thing, which I couldn't understand or appreciate at the time of a first watch. But now, especially with the state of things we're in today, it's like I really can't appreciate it more for trying to be something else while also paying a little tribute to the original.
Yeah. Well, this was, as I said, Mike Flanagan's last film that he made, at least for now. Maybe he'll make one again eventually. But after this, obviously the pandemic hit, but Mike Flanagan did still produce a few things. Haunting of Bly Manor is something that he only directed one episode of, but he did produce that. He also was a creator of Midnight Club, which came out on Netflix this past year. And recently was co-director and co-creator of The Fall of the House of Usher. All of those things that he didn't directly create and direct, we will talk about at the end of this series, but next we have to tackle the last thing that he did create and direct all on his own, and that is Netflix's Midnight Mass, which came out in 2021. And one of the biggest reasons we wanted to do this series, I think, was just to have an excuse to rewatch and talk about Midnight Mass.
Yeah, can't go into much detail there because there's going to be plenty of words for it, and I think we've talked long enough today. So, but I'm already like chomping at the bit to get started on this and rewatch it.
Yeah, and I will say we don't have anything planned yet in terms of when we're going to be talking about that or making that video, but there probably will be a bit of a gap just because of the stuff we have coming up on the channel, obviously with Star Trek, but also we're going to be doing some fun stuff for the holidays and things like that. And the Midnight Mass video, I mean, the Haunting of Hill House one was a big one, but I think the Midnight Mass video is probably going to be an even bigger project. So it's coming, most likely in 2024, but if you've enjoyed the Mike Flanagan series so far, as well as enjoying Audience Cut with this hybrid video, we appreciate it. And as far as Audience Cut is concerned, the next one will be our Christmas episode. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be a fun time. But yeah, a lot of exciting stuff to come. It's going to be awesome. But I'm going to get back to the nap that I was taking because I was actually very comfortable before you just rudely came to my house and started recording me. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to get back to sleep.
What? Oh, you're serious? Yeah. Okay. All right. That's fucking bullshit.